We've learned that procurement officials of companies are really more and more interested in understanding what is in the products they buy. So they want to know more about the ingredients, the materials that are in there. Is it easy to get these materials out of the product after you use it? Do we have evidence about the safety of these materials used? Do we have certificates in place? Is there recycled content, or is the content from a renewable source? These are all very straightforward types of information that really support decision making about circularity of products in an easy way, where decision makers can really see the differences between products that look relatively similar by looking more and more into the detailed information about their composition.
And so who are asking these types of questions about their products? Are those designers, or are those managers, or maybe senior managers? Who wants to know this type of information?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Emma. Obviously, we think that everyone should ask that question, but we're not there yet. So what we're seeing right now is that government officials are becoming more and more progressive. They're in charge of huge budgets, they have huge spends, and they get more and more, let's say, circularity goals in place already. So these procurement officials, we're trying to, let's say, give them the feeling that every time they purchase something, they have the power to change things. By integrating circularity indicators into their decision-making criteria, and by asking questions about what's in the product, where does it come from, is it safe, how can I reuse it, they're influencing the entire supply chain and the system behind the product itself. And this generates huge positive impact and can be a lever towards accelerating the transition towards the circular economy. And that's really our goal.
And do you think that they will also start asking the right questions, or different types of questions to, for example, their suppliers, because they are now focusing on what elements actually contribute to circularity? Yeah,
that's a good question, and I think what Sven was also saying earlier, I don't think it's about one indicator or just focusing on the product. I think we need to talk about the circular economy on multiple levels, but we do see that consumers, also in the business to business, they purchase a product, they want to identify with that product. So the product is basically our first focus point, and then we help them to ask relevant questions about that product related to the circular economy. Not from the perception that this is the complete questionnaire, but that this is a start of questions that make sense to ask, that businesses can answer and should be able to answer, to include them in the decision making to really achieve impact.
And can we maybe, a question to both of you, can we dig into what kind of questions really determine if something is circular? What kind of questions do you wish, these people will start asking their suppliers and other teams in their organization?
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's probably no simple answer to that question on what constitutes circular. There's always you want to of course have as much circulation as possible. You want to get as much value out of the material you're using as possible. Depending on the product, there can be completely different strategies. Sometimes it might be ideal to offer the product in a different business model. Sometimes there's just an easy way to make your product more easy to be disassembled so that it can be more easily recycled, or maybe you can reuse parts of it and so on. So it completely depends on which product you're looking at, what are the most important aspect for you. And that's why I think we kind of both say it's kind of quite important to give the decision makers the right different types of measurements to look at, A, and B, kind of the right of knowledge and high-level idea where they want to go, what are the goals of a circular economy.
Do you agree with that? Would you add some of these questions?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think we were seeing, especially in the past years, a lot of let's say, discussions about, I don't know exactly what the circular economy is. There are 200x definitions, so we first have to figure out the definition before we can take action. Well, I think that's bullshit, basically. I think we should start acting right now, and I think we can come up with a lot of, let's say, straightforward goals that relate to the circular economy, that are not all encompassing, but are things that we can start asking questions about right now, that we know that will help us progress in that transition. And one of these goals is, for instance, eradicating waste or decreasing waste. And a good indicator on a product level to ask to your suppliers is, okay, after I'm done with this product, what percentage of the weight is reusable, repairable, recyclable, biodegradable, compostable? If it's neither of these, then it will most likely become waste. So I'm buying waste, and I'm really not helping to retain the value of materials, which I think is a very important, let's say, driver for the circular economy.
What is your favorite example of a near circular product, and in what way is it lacking in this case?
Oh, well, that is that's a tough question. I will say that one of the inspiring products that we work with is one of our customers is Core. And they have a fiber-based material that can basically be reused over and over again, while it's also biodegradable. So this is, I think, an example material that has multiple, let's say, options for what's next, and provides a lot of flexibility towards users for how to reuse the product and the components again and again. And it also provides opportunity to put in something personal in the product, because they work with fibers that can be specifically related to the company they work with. So I would say that this is an interesting, very interesting product with huge potential. Yeah.
And where do you think would be the biggest challenge for them to really, take the next step in, becoming more circular?
Yeah. So the discussions we had with them, and which they actually brought up, are about generations, because since you can use these fibers over and over again, at some point you want to be able to communicate or register how many times this fiber itself has been used for a specific product or material. So you can maybe prioritize fibers that have, let's say, generation 10 over fibers from generation 1. So this is some, let's say, aspect that becomes, let's say, adds a level of complexity, but is interesting, thinking about generations of materials that have been used in their same form in many products.
If we look at the bigger systems, such as a city, how should they measure circularity? Who would like to start off with that question?
I can start off, because I've had many conversations with many different stakeholders, from companies, of course, but we're also working a lot with governments, working with other organizations like the UN, for example, and so on. So there are various different levels where there's an interest in measuring circularity. And while we focus on the product level earlier, where you're going into like very specific things, once you're getting broader, you of course don't really have like a possibility to understand all the details. You had to get more high-level measurements. And I think one thing that's important there is that even though your indicators on a, say, city level will likely be completely bit different than at a product level, you still want to work towards like the same goals, and want to have some kind of like common goals that you work towards within the framework of like your specific indicators. And if you're looking at the city level specifically, there's a lot of interest going there and trying to understand various things that can be measured related to circular economy. So the City of London, for example, they want to become like a become more circular. They have a circular economy roadmap and strategy, right? And they did like an investigation on what would be the things we want to measure. And they came up with very different things. They came up with measuring things like, well, decreasing the material intensity, for example, which is a very which is quite related to actually measuring the material circularity. But they also came up with other things like measuring like the impact of specific projects, or measuring like what impact does circular economy have on jobs and so on. So there are various kind of things that you might want to measure, and it will be different for different kinds of like organization depending on your strategy, but ultimately you kind of want to have the same goals.
Well, so for instance, we're now drafting a proposal for the Amsterdam metropolitan area together with C2C Expo Lab and TNO in the Netherlands. And they also want to become an international leader in the circular economy. And we're suggesting also goals and strategy approach for them, but also try to be focused on really selecting lighthouse projects, because we think it's very good to have, let's say, a big audacious goal as a city that inspires people, but at the same time you also need to have very clear, straightforward projects that you basically use to communicate to your citizens, to your people, to your stakeholders, and that really show that you're walking the talk. And I think that's where we arrive back again at the identity or the personality aspect. And I mean, London and the Amsterdam metropolitan area are totally different. So it's not weird that they have different routes for becoming more circular and have established different lighthouse projects. So I think comparison is a very relevant topic, but there should also be room for diversity and identity.